So we find ourselves in a period of time that has religious significance, historical significance, obviously emotional significance. We're in the between, moving from Pesach to Shavuos, where we're counting the days of the Omer. We're in between the Holocaust Memorial Day and Israel Independence Day. It's a very complicated period of time, which in many ways is incredible for the opportunities it has for us to explore religiously, emotionally, historically, and more. In this week's Torah portion, we read about the actual finally opening for business of the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And the Mishkan has a lot of the Torah dedicated, a lot of chapters in the Torah dedicated to its description and construction. We read about that in the book of Shmos, right? Starting with Parshas Truma. There's 5 Torah portions all about the Mishkan, but once it's constructed, it's not done yet. It has to be initiated. It has to be implemented. You have the building, you have the vessels, but what goes on there? What's the sacrificial service look like? Who's going to do it? And the like. And that's the opening portions of Vayikra describe that. And finally, Vayom Hashmini is the way the parsha begins. On the 8th day of the introduction, of the dedication, of the inauguration of the Mishkan, now it's open for business. And as it opens for business, now Aaron and his sons are in the role of us as the Kohanim. And as the first sacrifice is fully accepted and there's a fire comes down from heaven to consume it, the people are overwhelmed and they're amazed, and they as is commonly used, vayiplu al pneihem, they fall on their faces, and it says vayaronu, they sang. The word Rina is a name connected to song. Rina is a song. The Hebrew name Yaron, boy's name Yaron, will sing. There's this idea. So the Jewish people overwhelmed and they sing. And it has always stood out to me, this idea that the idea of song is the language of the soul. Right? Torah engages the intellect and song engages the soul. And the two meet. The Torah is actually called a shira at the very end of the Torah. This morning, someone at the minyan completed, made a siyum on what's called the Sefer HaChinuch, the book of religious instruction, which lists all the 613 commandments. And the 613th commandment is to write a Torah scroll. And the mitzvah to write a Torah scroll is based on a verse at the end of Devarim, Kisvu lachem es hashira hazot, write down this song. So the Torah is a song. So there's this synergy of intellect and soul that is certainly part of Torah, certainly part of Judaism. But the idea that on this 8th day, which 8 is a number which in Judaism 7 is the natural, and 8 means beyond the natural. It's the supernatural. It's beyond our understanding. So there was this religious experience that came about through the culmination of implementing God's commands and all of the instructions and all of the rituals, and that led to Vayaronu, a kind of overwhelming spiritual experience. And I think that Judaism encourages this type of experience, and we're at a point in the year where that experience was meant to be felt, is meant to be felt, and certainly the whole Pesach through Shavuos period provides opportunities for it. But I wanted to back up and talk about one opportunity which we're coming to at the end of its runway, which is called the birkat ha-ilanot, the blessing of the trees. It's practiced during the month of Nisan, that when a person encounters a tree that is starting to flower, there's a blessing that's recited. A blessing that praises God's renewal of creation during the season of redemption, in which we renew our commitment to serving God this season. And what's the bracha? So it starts like any bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam, shelo chiser ba'olamo klum. God is the source of all blessing, who has withheld nothing from this world. Uvara bo brios tovos, and created beautiful creatures. Uvi-ilanos tovos, and beautiful trees. Lehanos bahem b'nei adam, for humans to enjoy. And it's meant to be recited when one sees a fruit tree that's starting to flower. One has to find the fruit tree and see that it's flowering. Nisan is viewed as the Jewish spring month, and that's why it's the right time. If a person only encounters a flowering tree after Nisan, then it's also okay to say that blessing. It begs the question: what if you live in the southern hemisphere and you see it different seasons? And so there are all sorts of rules and regulations connected to this. But this is meant to be. Why do we have a blessing on this? We know we say blessings when we eat foods. We know we say blessings when we smell things that are nice, like the bisamim. What's this blessing? This blessing is more a declaration, but it's a declaration that God made the world for us to enjoy, even things that don't necessarily have practical benefit. Right? It's a blessing on an aesthetic. It's a beautiful tree. It's a beautiful flower. It's something beautiful. We're meant to be inspired. And so much so that there was a discussion, especially it started last year, continues. Can you say the bracha if on Zoom? If I go out to the tree and hold the camera up and you see the bracha, can you say it on Zoom? And so the answer is no, because you might see it and it might be pretty and beautiful, but you don't have that joy of the live experience. Right? Zoom is pretty good. And look, let's face it, if this was a Friday at 8:30 on a typical time, many people wouldn't be coming out to experience it. So Zoom, we can say a hatov hametiv on Zoom, but there's nothing like, can't beat the real thing. Coke's done really well with that slogan. You can't beat the real thing in terms of the religious experience, the joy that emerges from it. The Jews experienced that completion of the tabernacle, and it was awesome, and they sang. There's this idea also of we have to experience it in person. We have to experience firsthand this flowering of the tree to say that bracha. And thankfully it's done outdoors, so you can make sure you're socially distant, and you can say the bracha when seeing a tree that's flowering. But it's an idea of recognizing and being inspired religiously by what's around us. And being inspired religiously means that there's certain rules. So, for example, the Jewish law discusses what happens if this tree is a forbidden tree. What does it mean, a forbidden tree? Well, trees are kosher, but there are rules of agriculture. So technically, a Jew is not supposed to graft two types of species of fruits to make one grafted tree. Now, a Jew is allowed to get benefit from the fruit of that tree. We enjoy nectarines, even though it wasn't a natural fruit. At the same time, if there's a tree that a Jew has grafted that's flowering, you're not supposed to say the bracha on that tree, because even though it's beautiful, it's not religiously appropriate. So there's this idea of certainly experiencing this religious joy, and religious joy is meant to inspire us and motivate us to give thanks and feel inspired. At the same time, it's anchored in the religious experience. It's anchored in religious law. There are rules about this also. One of the examples of this is later on in the parsha, because this is also the portion where Aaron's sons died. And Aaron's sons died because they were involved in bringing a foreign fire onto the altar. And there's a whole conversation what exactly it was. They had one explanation. It goes along the lines that they really had a desire to express themselves religiously and passionately, but they went too far. So there's room for religious passion, and there's room for our own personal experience, but ultimately what we are learning from the Mishnah experience, what we learn from those opportunities we have to express our souls, is that, go for it, but recognize that it's still anchored, it's still tethered into Jewish law, into our obligations. I often talk about the tension that sometimes exists between the law and the spirit within Judaism, right? The legal obligations and the spiritual experience. And so I think I first encountered this in a book by Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb of blessed memory. You should think of the law as the body, and you should think of the spirit as the soul. So if you have the soul without a body, that's a ghost. It's ephemeral. It doesn't exist. And it's not anchored in reality. If you have the body without a soul, if you have the law without the spirit, what's a body without a soul? A corpse. It's dead. So our goal is to find the synergy between the two. And I think that we get a snapshot of that in the Parsha, of how the Jews react, and at the same time, on the flip side, what can go wrong with the death of Aaron's two sons. And I think it's the same, this birkat ha-ilanot, this blessing of beauty, which we're essentially acknowledging that it's something to bring into the religious sphere. At the same time, it is still bound by certain religious rules and regulations. Also wanted to mention another piece of this, the religious experience as being part of the religious experience as being part of the ritual, I think is also be found in the counting of the Omer. And we're in the middle of the Omer, we're 12 days in, and we're probably familiar with the idea that you have to count every day. If you miss a day, you can't count with a blessing anymore because your counting is compromised. And some wonder why. If I miss a day of praying, I can pray the next day. My prayer is not compromised. Why is the counting compromised? So it's a whole discussion in Jewish law. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik explains very straightforward fashion. The reason why you can't count anymore with a blessing after missing a day is that's not called counting. If you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, that's not counting. You no longer have a count. Sfirat HaOmer is counting the Omer, and counting the Omer requires that you be counting the entire period of the Omer. If you miss one complete day, you've missed out the complete counting of the Omer. You can acknowledge each different day, but you no longer can count with a blessing. And so that's one way that we look at the Omer. And so one of the other halachic details of the Omer is, if I count, can you listen? Does that count as if you counted? Right? Sometimes one person will say Kiddush and the other people will listen, and that counts as their Kiddush. So does my counting count as your counting? And there's a discussion in Jewish law about this. The consensus is no, you should have your own counting. And one of the suggestions is, like Rabbi Soloveitchik said, it's not counting if you don't count it. Right? Many of us probably can, remember Sesame Street and, the count, right? It only counts if it goes 1, 2, 3. It doesn't count if you don't say it. There's another understanding of this. I heard this from one of the kids of the community. Ezra Magder referenced this idea on the last day of Pesach. That the period between Pesach and Shavuot is a period of the religious journey of the Jewish people. We went from being free people with the Exodus to becoming the Jewish people at Sinai. And therefore, there's a religious journey that's taking place during this time period. And I have to experience that religious journey. How do I experience that religious journey? On the most basic level to express that religious journey is to count each day. And so the idea, if I don't count a certain day, it's not, the journey is not complete. The religious experience of the Omer is not complete. The religious experience of the Omer is meant to, has several different pieces to it. But at its core, the religious journey of the Omer means I have to count each day and acknowledge each day along the journey. And so, it's just another element of this period of religious journey that makes it a very full period, whether it be going from Pesach to Shavuos, whether it be about this is a season when we see the trees, we say the blessing over them, we're inspired to recognize that there's religious value and the beauty of nature all around us, while being tethered to the rules and regulations. It has to be live, it has to be an appropriate tree. The religious inspiration and the religious reaction of the Jews after the construction of the Mishkan, Vayaronu, and they sang. But if you take it a little bit too far, you end up in the tragedy of the death of Aaron's two sons. And this is, continues to be another opportunity to explore that basic tension, but that basic synergy that complement each other, the law and the spirit within the Jewish traditions. I think it's a good time. Right now it's a little bit cloudy outside, but hopefully, over the next couple of days, the sun comes out. You have an opportunity to stop, smell the roses, and bless the trees, and also think about how this impacts and supports our commitment to the law and the spirit, making our Judaism more full and inspiring.